Hey friends, welcome back to Movies in a Bottle, where today we are breaking down arguably the greatest zombie movie of all time. It's the movie that reanimated the genre and terrified audiences by popularizing the running zombie. My brother Dirk showed me this movie about 20 years ago, so I thought this was the perfect time to cover it before the new one comes out. So join me as I revisit Jim's journey to see if he survives 28 days later. Mass civil unrest is sweeping across the world as people are tearing cities apart. But it turns out it's just a monkey being forced to watch all this violence in an experiment of some kind. Some heavily armored animal rights activists must have heard about what's going on down here because they break in to stop the experiments. A scientist tries to warn them that these animals are infected with a disease made of pure rage, and if anyone is bitten or so much as even scratched, it will spread. Naturally, they ignore his warning and release it anyway. The monkey instantly attacks its rescuer, and in just a few moments she's vomiting on her fellow activists, spreading the rage virus faster than anyone could contain. They further explain in the behind the scenes that they caused all this by trying to find a suppressant to rage like Valium is to depression. They described it as your worst road rage times a million. 28 days later, the main character of our story, Jim, wakes up totally alone in a deserted hospital. He's been in a coma since the world fell, and he only survived the chaos because an unknown person had the foresight to lock the helpless patient in his room before sliding the key under the door. A little clue to this are the scars on the shaved parts of his head. Jim searches the ransacked hospital for anyone or anything that can help, but all he comes up with are a few Pepsis for the journey. After that, he begins wandering the ruins that were once London, shouting for any signs of life to respond. Okay, couple movie mistakes here. At around the 9:40 mark when he's shouting hello in front of Big Ben, there's someone way off to the right holding something wide up. And then at roughly 11 minutes, there's a guy way off in the distance in the back, like right in the middle of the shot, and he's just right there. Keep in mind, he's supposed to be totally alone for all this. The city feels lonelier and lonelier as Jim searches, but it's soul-crushing when he comes across a giant wall that's completely covered in photos and messages of people trying to find their loved ones. Eventually, he wanders into a church, but unlike everywhere else so far, he's greeted with a terrible sight. There are bodies piled over the pews, and this time when Jim calls hello, he gets an answer. But it's not someone calling back to him. No, it's a ravenous priest that tries to attack. Everyone knows Pepsis are a bad matchup for zombies, so he's barely able to run outside with a bunch of infected chasing after him. Luckily, he's saved by some mass survivors that make very good use of some Molotovs and a stack of gas canisters to blow up a petrol station and the infected in one explosion. Jim tells his rescuers that he was a bike courier, and the last he knew, he got hit by a car making a delivery. The other two introduce themselves as Mark and Selena, and she goes on to explain how the world fell rapidly from the new virus. Understandably, Jim is in disbelief, but he thinks surely there must be a government of some kind. But they insist it's all gone. TV, radio, the army, their families, everything, it's gone. But Jim's family lives nearby, so he's going to check. Mark stops him, giving him 2 rules. Unless you have a choice, never travel alone and always travel during the day. Mark coldly says that they can find his dead family tomorrow, and he gives them some junk food to eat. As promised, the next morning they go check on Jim's parents, only to find more heartbreak. They have taken their own lives with a combination of medicine and alcohol, and left holding a picture of their son with a note that reads, "Jim, with endless love, we left you sleeping. Now we're sleeping with you. Don't wake up." That is just beyond tragic. They camp there for the night, but Jim can't manage to get any sleep. He's reliving memories of his parents when, oh no, the infected smashed through the windows. Selena and Mark saved Jim in the nick of time, but sadly Mark was bitten in the process. Without even batting an eye, Selena does what she has to do. Quick movie mistake. Jim has blood near his eye when he first scoots away from the attack, but it's mostly gone when Selena asks if he was bit. There's a surprising amount of continuity mistakes in this movie that I don't have time to point out, but look it up if you're also into that sort of trivia. Sim and Jelena have to stay on the move because of the noise, and Selena explains to Jim why she did that to Mark. She repeats the warnings from the scientists from the beginning and says that you only have about 10 to 20 seconds before they turn. She goes on to further explain that she'd do it to him too, and she feels that staying alive is as good as things get now. But they're interrupted when they spot flashing Christmas lights several stories up in an apartment window far off in the distance. They get to the building, struggle past the barricade of shopping carts inside, and start climbing up the never-ending staircase. They get most of the way there, but have to stop because Jim is crashing out from the combination of him having no fat and only eating sugar. But again, the relentless zombies break in and close in on them with insane efficiency. Without enough Pepsis to save themselves, Selena leaves Jim in her dust as she flies up the stairs, but soon they're both stopped by a man in riot gear, complete with shield and all. He gives them a room number to go to and uses his shield to fight off the pursuing infected. A girl locks Jim and Selena out of the room until the mysterious man tells her that it's alright. When they get inside and make their introductions, the big scary guy in the riot suit is actually just a charming father named Frank, doing his best to keep his daughter Hannah safe through the end of the world. Frank lets Jim clean up for the first time in a month, and before turning in, he talks with Selena. Jim thinks Frank and Hannah are good people, but she reminds him she's only concerned if they're going to slow her down. Jim still thinks it's cold, but takes a moment to really thank her for getting him this far. All she says is, sure, but that's as probably as sincere as she's going to be for now. The next day, Frank takes Jim up to the roof to show how dire their situation is. He has the roof covered in various containers to catch rain, including some that definitely couldn't hold water, but they're all bone dry. However, Frank shares the plane with Jim and Selena. He cranks on a radio that starts playing a recorded message from soldiers that say they have other survivors and they answer to infection. Cards on the table, Frank says that he needs them to make sure Hannah gets to the soldiers, even if something happens to him on the way. Selena doesn't trust the message, though. For all they know, the soldiers could be dead by now, and she doesn't think there is an answer to the infection. It's done all the damage it can. Hannah joins the conversation, though, to say that her dad's wrong. They need each other. Life isn't sustainable in the cities, and soldiers might be the only ones that can actually keep anybody safe. How are they going to get there, you ask? Well, Frank was a cabbie before everything, and they take his taxi, of course. After passing more ruins that were once the modern world, they get to a tunnel and have to make a choice. Selena wants to go the direct path, but Jim says they need to stick to the daylight, even if it costs them more time. Frank likely feels a bit uneasy being out in the open, so he opts for the more direct path. Almost immediately, they run into a blockade, but Frank has watched way too much Dukes of Hazzard to be stopped and floors it. They manage to ramp on the other cars and they make it to the other side, but they have a rather rough landing and pop a tire. At first, a swarm of rats moves through, but Selena realizes that they're actually running from a horde of zombies. Without even a second to spare, they fix the tire and barely get away. The director, Danny Boyle, cast athletes for the role of the infected because of how important physicality was to them. He thought that they could do things that most people, including YouTubers, can't do, so he thought it would be really interesting to see how their movements translated on screen to infected behavior. The group makes a stop on their way through the city and finds probably the only grocery store that wasn't looted, and in a moment of lightheartedness, they all have a fun little shopping spree and get their favorite foods. Back on task, they stop at a gas station with an abandoned fuel truck outside, and Frank siphons it for gas. Then Jim seems to forget how cruel this world is and ignores Selena's warning not to wander inside. When he does, an infected kid sneaks up on him and attacks, so to defend himself, Jim tragically ends the boy's suffering. They keep traveling towards the radio broadcast and stop for a picnic, and even get to see some wild horses roaming the countryside. Then we get my favorite scene of the movie. Jim and Selena are talking alone, and he starts to ask, "You know what I was thinking?" And she interrupts to guess. He's thinking that he's never going to read a book that wasn't already written, or see a movie that hadn't already been shot. And he says, "No, that's what you were thinking." But she says after seeing Frank and Hannah, she was thinking that she was wrong about there being no point to anything anymore. Jim agrees. "Now that's what I was thinking." And she sneaks a quick kiss. They camp there for the night, and to get through sleeping outdoors, Selena shares her stash of Valium with Jim, and Frank even allows Hannah half of one. That night, Jim has a nightmare that he was left behind. But it was just a bad dream, so soon enough they're back on the road, and after driving for a little while, they get to the checkpoint. There were a lot of scenes where they used iconic locations like this one here at the M1, and they only had a few takes because the police were just holding people back in real time for them to record. The director didn't want them to have to use their imagination on anything they didn't have to. It's starting to look like maybe Selena was right about the soldiers because the checkpoint is abandoned, and it looks like everyone left in a hurry. Selena warns that they all need to leave, and Frank's cheerful personality finally cracks and he lashes out at her. He takes a moment to collect himself, but this crow overhead just keeps squawking and squawking. Frank just wants a moment of peace, so he tries to shoo it away, and when he does, a drop of infected blood lands in his eye. Right afterwards, Hannah comes around the corner to check on him, but all he has time to say is that he's sorry for losing his temper and he loves her very much. Like all those before him, Frank turns quickly, and Selena shields Hannah's eyes and screams for Jim to stop Frank, but he doesn't have to, because the soldiers come out of hiding and take care of it for him. Practically still in shock over what just happened, the three of them are loaded onto a truck and taken back to a reinforced mansion where the soldiers have set up their main base of operation. Here our survivors meet the leader, Major Henry West, and they're welcomed as guests. These soldiers do seem well provided, but Selena can't believe what happened to Frank, and she's starting to feel like things are pointless again, even after a kiss from Jim. West gives Jim a tour of the mansion, and he tells him what he meant by having the answer to infection. Okay, final movie mistake I'm pointing out. One of the guys that opened the gates is played by the actor Marvin Campbell, the same guy who plays the infected Mailer. They had just already filmed those scenes before they figured out who was going to be Mailer. He explains that they have fortified this place and they're going to rebuild from here. And on the final stop of their tour, Jim meets the infected Mailer that West has chained up outside. He's keeping him alive to figure out how long it takes for an infected to starve. That night, the soldiers prepare a feast to celebrate their guests, but the food is nearly inedible. And at the table, they're discussing the state of things. One soldier, Farrell, proposes that the infected wiping everyone out is a return to normal since humans have relatively only been here for a blink of an eye. West counters in the past month that all he's seen is people killing people, and that's all he's seen in the several months before that too. Selena tries to get Hannah to eat, but she says that all she wants to do is bury her father, and with venom in her words, she reminds West that he is one of those people that he's talking about. Dinner is interrupted when explosions and alarms sound off outside. The infected are closing in fast. Everyone but West springs into action, and even though they seem rather inexperienced, they do fend off the horde. When they get back inside and see Selena, they reveal their true colors. Corporal Mitchell takes her machete to antagonize her and then makes an absolutely unwanted advance. Things escalate quickly when Jim tries to help her. Mitchell tosses Jim to the ground, and the only decent soldier there, Farrell, knocks Mitchell off of Jim. West shows up in time to break things up and sends his men away. He apologizes to Selena and returns her machete, but she understandably just stomps off to go check on Hannah. Wes talks with Jim in his office, and they clearly looted the taxi because he pours them a drink from the bottle of liquor that Frank took from the grocery store. Wes asks Jim who he's killed to get this far, and Jim seems shaken, but he tells West about the kid from the gas station. Wes comforts him, saying that it's all about survival now, and Jim gets the horrible reveal about why they're really there. In an effort to give his men hope from the future, Major West promised them women, and they set up the broadcast as bait. Jim wastes no time trying to get Hannah and Selena out of there, but he's too late because the soldiers have already made their move. They knock Jim out before he could leave, and while he's dazed, he sees Farrell trying to defend them, but he's outnumbered and taken away for his betrayal. West says that he can't let the women go, but he does give Jim a chance to join them. Jim doesn't really seem to be all there and just stares at West until he's taken away with Farrell. Jim wakes up in a shack outside the main estate, tied up near Farrell, who's shouting conspiracies about how the rest of the world is fine and how they quarantined the UK. He is cut off when a couple of soldiers come back in to escort them to join a mass grave. Against Mitchell's wishes, Farrell manages to convince the other soldier to end him quickly, and while Mitchell is chewing out his subordinate, Jim escapes. They chase after him, but he was really hiding in the mass grave, allowing him to sneak away. Very curiously, Jim stumbles on his way out and sees a helicopter flying overhead. Was Farrell right? We don't know. Back at the house, things are going as terribly as you can imagine. The soldiers are making the women change clothes and come back. They're kicking and screaming every step of the way, but Selena manages to get a moment alone with Hannah after stunning a soldier with a kiss and convincing them to wait outside. She gives Hannah a Valium to comfort her through what's to come, but she's caught in the act. Luckily, the alarms sound off, causing the evil soldiers to run to their posts. Likely for the first time since the world fell, the soldiers aren't just battling the infected, but they're also in a battle of guerrilla warfare with Jim the Courier. He was the one cranking the alarm, and when West and the other soldier check it out, Jim makes very short work of the second guy. West starts to panic and fire blindly into the shadows until some infected start showing up. He takes them out, but when he tries to leave, his truck was sabotaged, so he's taken the Shoelace Express. The bad guys guarding Selena and Hannah at the mansion start to get unnerved when they think they hear one of their claymores exploding, but it was actually just Jim setting Mailer free, and Mitchell goes to check it out. Meanwhile, the Valium is really starting to work on Hannah because she starts to casually talk about how she thinks the other guys are gone and soon the ones guarding them will be too. Then she presciently states that they're next as their old comrade Mailer smashes through the window and tears into them. I only noticed during this rewatch when he smashes through, Hannah says, "Whoa," without a care in the world. Jim watches through the windows as the infection spreads amongst the men inside, either by his own means or by luring the infected around. He makes sure to leave no soldiers standing in his path. Upstairs, Hannah manages to cleverly hide behind a mirror, and then Jim makes his way into the attic above where Mitchell is holding Selena. There is no way we're going to be able to show it on YouTube, but Jim drops down and ends Mitchell so violently that Selena isn't sure if he's infected or not. Really risking it all, Jim stays silent and steps forward, and Selena hesitates, swinging her machete. Longer than a heartbeat, Jim remarks. They kiss, and Hannah shows up to break a bottle upside Jim's head because she thought he was biting her, not kissing her. But there's no time for that. They have to run. Hannah hops in the driver's seat of her dad's taxi that's parked outside, and when Jim and Selena open up the back door, they're surprised by West. He shoots Jim in the side for revenge for his men, but Hannah thinks fast and reverses the cab to a hall where Mailer can break the back window and drag West out, giving him what he deserves. With the infected always closing in and no other good options, they load Jim up and Hannah has to ram the gate so they can leave. Before we end things, I want to mention a couple of alternate endings. In the writing process, after Frank was infected, they were going to keep him alive and take him back to the lab from the beginning of the movie and learn that they could save him with a blood transfusion. Of course, Jim would do it and it would be tragic, but they realized that didn't make any sense at all if you could be infected with just a drop of it in your blood. So yeah, they scrapped that. And then the next one that they had actually filmed was just as dark. It's where Hannah and Selena take Jim to a hospital and he tells them about the plane, but he dies as they failed to save him. Another 28 days later, Selena managed to save Jim, and the three of them are out in a very well-supplied cottage in the country. Hannah barges in to say that she heard it again, and the three of them spring into action, dragging bundles of sheets outside. They're spreading out a message that reads, "Hello," for a jet pilot that's soaring overhead, and there's no doubt he saw him this time, because in Finnish he says what translates to, "Will you send a helicopter?" Let's close with something pretty interesting. In the making of all the way back in 2002, they had said a global pandemic was imminent. Cillian Murphy himself even said that he was uneasy with things because they're always trying to test how much the world can take. They also cited a terrible foot and mouth outbreak that took the lives of over 5 million animals around that time. And they also warned that we need to be very careful about diseases from animals and reference HIV. Again, this was all the way back in 2002. Alright, that's all I have for you in this breakdown. Thank you so much for dropping by. Of course, leave a comment down below if there's anything you want me to cover specific in the future. And subscribe and ring the bell for all the latest and greatest from me. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. I'm actually almost at 50 subscribers now, so it means the world to me that you're choosing to spend time and hang out at Movies in a Bottle. So that's all I have. Y'all be good. I'll see you very soon in my next video. Thanks.